Welcome, everyone, to the VBC Bible Institute and podcast. Welcome back to our course, Journey Through the Bible. Welcome back to what appears to be a never-ending journey in Genesis chapter 5. We appear to be stuck. We appear to have gone off the road, and we can't get back on the road. And no matter what I try, I just seem to go further and further off the road, and anything that can go wrong has gone wrong in our journey through Genesis chapter 5. This is a situation where trying to teach through the Bible, doing a journey through the Bible, trying to teach a course for the VBC Bible Institute has turned into something I hadn't planned for. Everything has gone wrong, but you know what? I'm right here. I'm still trying. I'm still struggling. I'm still swinging. Use whatever metaphor, but I'm still punching. I'm still swinging. Use a sports metaphor, any metaphor that demonstrates that kind of illustrates the idea that I'm here still trying. Then you can use that. But here I am. I'm not giving up as of yet. Okay, maybe I need to be more spiritual about all of this. But man, what is the deal with Genesis chapter 5? It's been crazy. So I apologize. We should be we should be much further into Genesis. I'm in a sense, your guide for this journey. I'm the one who's supposed to be moving you along. And yes, a lot of things have happened beyond my control. I obviously did not ask for people to enter into the church in the middle of me teaching to cause the trouble and I'm not going to go back through everything that happened. Obviously, it was not my plan to be teaching and have the internet go down. I mean, I could just go through every situation, and most of those situations are beyond my control. Some of the mess ups have been mine, and which contributed to me deleting the teaching and trying to do it over. So that's on me. I accept responsibility for that. But man, you just start going, what is going on? So here we are. Genesis chapter 5. Are you ready? Genesis chapter 5. Now, I know we're in Genesis chapter 5. If you were listening to the last session, you know that we've kind of backed up to Genesis chapter 4. And there's a reason for all of this. There's a method to all of this. It may seem like that I don't know what I'm doing, but really, I wanted us to go right past Genesis chapter 4. Now, I gave you an assignment in Genesis chapter 4. I gave you an assignment which would have kind of alerted you to, wait a minute, there's something going on here. And I don't think I've received anybody's completed assignment for what I gave in Genesis chapter 4 to do a biographical study for each person mentioned. And I think if someone would have completed that study, or maybe you've completed it, but you haven't sent it to me. If you would have sent it to me, then I may have seen that you caught it, or I may have realized, people have some questions about this. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I don't know if anyone's even interested. But here's the thing. I think something is going on in Genesis chapter 4 and Genesis chapter 5. I think something is going on that is giving us a significant spiritual lesson, but I think something is going on in Genesis 4 and 5 that is significant and helping us possibly come up with a correct interpretation of Genesis chapter 6. So we have to take the time. We have to spend the time. There are so many theories and craziness when it comes to Genesis 6 that we can help ourselves by spending the extra time in Genesis 4 and 5, because what we discover there will then limit the number of interpretive options we have when we get to Genesis 6. Genesis 4 and 5, and I think what is happening here, will limit all of our interpretive choices. Like, we may be able to go to all these books and go, this person says this, and this person says this, and this person says this. But when we spend the time in Genesis 4 and 5 and then carry that information into Genesis 6, I think we'll be able to stop, look at many of those choices and go, that won't work, that won't work, that won't work, that won't work, because of what we discovered in Genesis 4 and 5. So look, I have no idea. As a teacher, you have a responsibility to try to give the people what they need, whether they want it or not. People may be more than ready to move on past Genesis 4 and 5, but I'm not. All right. Now, if you remember our last session, here's what happened. Let me remind you. In Genesis chapter 5, as we're reading Genesis chapter 5, we come across two names in Genesis chapter 5. The first name, we come across many names, but two names of significance comes up in Genesis chapter 5. And the first one is mentioned in Genesis chapter 5 and verse 18. Genesis chapter 5, verse 18. And Jared lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch. All right. There was first significant name. All right. Enoch. Then the second significant name shows up in Genesis chapter 5, verse 25. And Methuselah lived 187 years, and he begat Lamech. Enoch, Lamech. These two names are significant, and here's the reason why. There's an Enoch in chapter 5. There's an Enoch in chapter 4. There's a Lamech in chapter 5. There's a Lamech in chapter 4. So we have two men named Enoch, two men named Lamech. Two of them are mentioned in Genesis 4. Two of them are mentioned in Genesis 5. Now, I understand you may say, well, just a coincidence. They had the same name. Maybe it was a popular name. Maybe there's nothing going on here. I don't know. For me, I just feel like there's something happening here. There's something significant occurring here. So basically what we end up with are two genealogical records and two separate genealogical records tracing two genealogies, two lines, and both lines have an Enoch, both lines have a Lamech, and as a result, I think these two lines are being compared and contrasted to demonstrate some spiritual lessons to you, to you, to me, to us, to I, to all of us, to we, everyone. And I think we really need to take the time to try to understand it, okay? Now, I'm not going to go back and review everything we studied in our last session. We went back to Genesis chapter 4. We looked at Enoch, all right? We looked at this Enoch. The most significant thing I want to make sure you realize is the Enoch in Genesis chapter 4 is a son of Cain. Now, we know Cain had obviously killed his brother. He was worried about his punishment. God showed him some mercy, put a sign on him that, hey, if you kill Cain, then, vengeance is going to occur. In fact, let me read the exact words for you. Genesis chapter 4, verse 15, and the Lord said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. All right. So Cain had killed someone. God doesn't have him killed. God doesn't kill him. He shows him mercy, puts a mark on him, and like, hey, if anyone kills Cain, there's going to be vengeance. There's going to be. In fact, again, let me read the exact words for you. The exact words are, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. All right. So don't touch Cain. Leave him alone. Now, that is significant. It shows God's mercy. It shows God. Multiple times in the Bible, it's very interesting because in Genesis 9, obviously God established his capital punishment, saying, hey, if you kill someone, you should be killed, ultimately because men are created in the image of God. Clearly signifies this, but yet there are multiple times God doesn't carry it out. Cain kills his brother. God doesn't have him killed. David has someone killed. God doesn't have David killed. We see this, Moses kills someone, God doesn't have Moses killed. You see this in a number of situations in the Bible, and it's kind of fascinating and interesting that it demonstrates God's mercy, God's compassion. Even though he calls for that punishment to be carried out, and many times God himself doesn't carry out that same punishment that he prescribes in certain texts. Very interesting. We could talk about that all day. The good thing to just know is when God, he may state a judgment, but God is also a God of mercy and compassion and forgiveness, and that is a good thing. But in spite of God's mercy, Cain, hey, look, here, I'm giving you this mark. You can trust me. You don't have to worry about it. But we know what Cain did. Cain verse 16, Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. Now he builds this city. Now, I remember there's some dispute in the Hebrew text. Who built the city? Did Enoch build the city? Did Cain build the city? Bottom line is a city gets built. And I think the narrative seems to carry it out. This is the way I kind of read the narrative. Instead of Cain trusting, hey, God has given me this sign, no one's going to touch me, Cain goes and builds a city almost, in my mind, for, like, he's going to build a place of protection, a place where he can have authority. He's going to build the city. He'll be the founder of the city. He can protect himself in that city. He can have guards, whatever the case may be. It just seems like, hey, okay, God, you gave me this sign and you said you'll carry out vengeance, but I'm going to go do this to try to protect myself. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. But what's interesting is this: he names the city after his son, and this is going to set up a principle that we're going to see as we continue in Genesis 4. This is very important. Cain's line. This is very important. They have rejected God, and once you reject God, listen, you reject God, you begin to inflate and promote your name and yourself. If you reject God, if you remove God, then you begin to exalt self. And here's what Cain does. All right, I killed my brother. God was mad at me. I'm going away from God. He departs from the presence of God. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a city. I'm going to worry about myself. And I'm going to name this city after my son. I produced this son, and I'm going to name it after him. I'm going to exalt self. When we reject God, we exalt self. When we reject God, when we downplay God's name, we exalt our name. And I think this demonstrates this entire line of Cain is rejection of God and exaltation of self, self-promotion, and identifying and going to, they're going to create a name for themselves that becomes what they're known for. It's all about them, okay? And just keep this in mind, because this is going to play out as we've already seen in the last session, and I'm doing a little bit of review, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, so then there's Cain. Now, there's Cain. Then he has a son, Enoch. They build this city. The city is named after the name of his son, Enoch. Then, and some say that the city may have been so significant or the name becomes so well known. Some believe the Enoch in Genesis 5 was named after the Enoch in Genesis 4. Now that's speculation. We don't know, but obviously some think that way. All right, but there's no question Cain builds a city. I think we can kind of read there that it's for his own self-preservation. Hey, okay, God gave me the mark, but I'm not trusting in that. I'm going to trust in myself to build a city to protect myself. And then I'm going to exalt and elevate what I have made. I built a city. I made a son. I'm naming after him. All right. I think we see kind of a mentality. And then we saw the descendants of Enoch, or all the children, we'll read it directly from the text. Genesis 4:18. And Enoch was born, and unto Enoch was born Irad. And Irad begot Mehujael, and Mehujael begot Methusael, and Methusael begot Lamech. Now, there we get to Lamech, which we started covering in the last session. Now, what did we see about Lamech? Let's see. And I really have to put this all together, so just be patient with me, all right? Here we go. Genesis 4:19. Here we go. First thing we saw about Lamech is he had two wives. He had two wives. The name of his wives was Ada and the other Zillah. Now, very important that we know these two wives, because this establishes, and we talked about this in the last session, I'm going to state it again, that what we see here with Lamech taking two wives, he becomes, in a sense, the biblical father of polygamy. He's the first case of polygamy mentioned in the Bible, all right? Clearly in the Bible, in the beginning, God designed marriage to be a union between one man and one woman. All right, the two become one for life. But Lamech didn't care about God's design for marriage. One woman wasn't enough to satisfy him. He wanted more. Maybe he was controlled by lust and didn't want to limit his physical desires to one woman. Maybe he was power hungry and wanted more than one wife in order to have more children, to produce a larger clan, increase his power, make a name for himself. Probably Lamech was driven by both lust and a lust for power, a lust for physical pleasure and a lust for power. Basically, he was a prototype of all who ignore the Creator. Now, I think this just carries the idea on. Here's Cain. Hey, I'm departing from God. I'm going to build a city. I'm going to name it after my son. I'm going to exalt us, exalt self. I'm going to exalt what I have produced. It's all about me. Here comes Lamech. Hey, I'm going to have 2 wives. I'm going to have 2 wives. I'm not going to follow. I'm going to throw out God's ways. I'm going to throw out his plan. I'm going to get rid of that. And remember the name of Lamech. Remember his name. Overthrower. Strong, powerful, one who is struck. I think some found things that mentioned wild man. Basically one who overthrows. In fact, I think I have the possible other names or the possible meaning for Lamech here. Let me look here. Got a couple of sources here of possible meanings of the names. Let me go here. Let me go up. The striker down, the wild man. The striker down and the wild man. The striker down and the wild man. So Lamech is the one who overthrows. He strikes down. In a sense, Lamech is saying, hey, I'm taking 2 wives because I'm striking down what God said. I'm overthrowing it. I'm going to use my strength and my power to get 2 women. I'm introducing this idea of polygamy, more than one wife. It's the epitome of this. And we see this in the line of Cain. I want to just stress this. In the line of Cain, we are seeing this. Reject God, exalt self. Downplay the name of God and exalt your name, your lineage, your heritage, your accomplishments. It's all about you. And I cannot stress that enough. I think that is the significance of what's being demonstrated here. So he had 2 wives. Now remember the name of his wives, because I think it's also very important. His 2 wives, Ada and Zillah. Ada means beauty, beautiful ornament, and Zillah means shade or shadow. Now, what's the idea here? Lamech, the overthrower, the one who is strong and powerful, in a sense rejects God's ways, takes 2 wives, and his 2 wives are beautiful. One is beautiful and one is shade, possibly the idea that she brings comfort. So here's the man who's overthrowing what God wants. He gets 2 wives. One is beautiful and one produces some kind of comfort. Just keep that in mind, because from a human perspective, the things Lamech is doing and the things that are happening is going to produce this idea of, man, this is a powerful family. They're successful. Look at all that they have. It's almost like we could become envious of it. Here's this powerful man doing what he wants. He has a wife that's beautiful and he has a wife that's comforting. Look at this. Look at Cain. He built a city. He built a city and named it after his son. Look at their human accomplishments. Building a city that you can name after your son so that the name will live on forever, right? Or at least that's the idea. Will live on for a long period of time. As long as the city exists, all right? And then here's this man, Lamech. He's the overthrower, striker down. He's going his own way. He ends up with 2 women. One's beautiful. One is comforting, shade, and he's fulfilling his physical desires, and he may be doing it because he wants to produce as many children as possible, so that he'll have a lineage, a line, a heritage, a legacy. He may be doing it for his namesake and for the future, and it may be about exalting self. And I just want to stress this over and over. I'm going to stress this over and over and over again. All right. So keep that in mind. So he had 2 wives, polygamy. Next, he had children. We talked about this. Let's just go through this quickly. He had children. Here are the names of the children. Jubal, Genesis 4:20. All right. Or Jabal, I should say. Jabal, Genesis 4:20. All right, let's look at them. Genesis 4:20. And Ada bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents and of such as have cattle. So the first child they produce is Jabal. He's the father of such that dwell in tents and of such as have cattle. I want to make sure you see this. He changes culture forever. He established this idea of tent making a shelter. Instead of staying outside, we can now go inside with a shelter to be protected. And then he establishes cattle, probably as some kind of an industry, a cattle business, raising cattle, not just for what you need, but probably for, bargaining, trading, whatever the case may be, as a form of money, as a form of something that you have, a sign of wealth, a sign of power. But I want you to realize he would have changed everything by establishing those two things. So here's the overthrower, the one who's rejected God, Lamech. He's adopted polygamy. He has two wives, but he gets a beautiful one and one that's comforting, Shade. Produces a son by the name of Jabal, who goes on to, who is the father of such as dwell in tents and such as we have cattle. He establishes two things that are going to change that culture forever and for years and years and years and years to come, right? Change the world, right? That looks like pretty successful, powerful, exalting that name, exalting their success, right? The second one is Jubal. Genesis 4:21, and his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. The next one is the father of music. Music literally changed the world. Every culture has been influenced by music. There isn't a culture that hasn't been influenced by music. Every person on the planet has experienced music in some way, shape, or form. It is something that all human beings have in common. We've all experienced music. He literally changed the entire history of the human race. So the man who's the overthrower, who ends up with two wives, one beautiful and one's comforting, has two sons that literally change the world. But wait, he's not done. All right? Let's remind ourselves, okay? So we have Jabal, then we have Jubal, then we have Tubal-Cain. Look at verse 22. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. All right. So now this one takes these tools, right, or takes these materials, like brass and iron, and creates all kinds of tools and all kinds of different things that can be utilized, made of this material, which was going to change the world forever and change culture forever as they were moving on. Whatever devices and tools and objects they were using, he comes along and says, hey, I'm going to take brass and iron. And I'm going to be an instructor of every artificer and brass and iron. He's going to change the world. So here's this man who's rejected God. Ends up with two wives. One's beautiful, one's comforting. 3 children, literally history-changing, life-altering sons who changed the course of human history. Talk about successful. And this one, again, this 100% demonstrates that the world can be very successful. They can create things. They can create things that change the world. And sometimes as Christians, we sometimes sell Christianity. Some do. That, hey, if you become a Christian, we're going to be the best. We'll be the best musicians. We'll be the best writers. We'll be the best TV producers. We'll be the best mechanics. No. There's no truth in that. Christianity doesn't make you better. Many times the world has people who are far more talented, far more creative, far more come up with things that change the world forever. And we've got to just embrace that reality. Becoming a Christian doesn't just somehow make us better at everything. Christianity constantly sells that by taking verses out of context, like, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. We just rip verses out of context and apply it to every aspect of our life. Well, it doesn't work that way. Christians don't always make the best music. Sometimes they make absolute, complete, utter garbage. They don't always build the best houses, build the best buildings, design the best buildings. No, it's design the best cities. In many cases, it's lost people. And we just got to accept that. And I think it's also very important to realize that when you trace the origin of things, many times that origin ends up right there in the hands of a family that's rejected God. And sometimes Christians will say, well, you can't, that music, if you trace its origin, it goes back to there. Well, all music goes back to the origin of a lost person. There's no sign that anyone in this family line is following God. Clearly not Lamech. Clearly not. All right. And so clearly this seems to indicate that these things that we all use, right? Shelter, tents, cattle industry, okay, music, iron and brass, different tools and devices and objects made out of different materials. These all are traced back to this family, to this man and his children who have rejected God, overthrown God, and are following they're trying to overthrow the rules of God. Obviously can't overthrow God, but you get the idea. They're just throwing that all out. But look at how successful they have been. I cannot stress that enough. We see that. Now, also, and I know I'm reviewing all of this, they have a sister here. Tubal-Cain has a sister. She's mentioned right there briefly in verse 22. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. All right. So they have a sister, Naamah, and her name means loveliness. Loveliness. So I want you to see, here's this family, a man who's an overthrower. Hey, I'm going to overthrow God's rules. I'm going to do what I want. This man who takes two wives, and he gets two wives. One is beautiful, right? An ornament. The other one's a shade, possibly a comforting woman. So he has comfort. He has beauty. He takes these two women. He produces this family of people who literally change the world. These brothers, these sons who do all of these amazing things. And then there's a daughter there, okay, the sister of Tubal-Cain, who's loveliness. Everything about this family shows power, success. You would be almost envious of them. You would almost go, wow, look at all the things they've accomplished. And they have done it without God. But it's all about exalting them, their accomplishments. Their accomplishments are even listed out. It's about what they have done. It's all about them. It's all about their name. It's all about their line. All right. One commentary puts it this way. All of this is impressive. It's proof that you don't have to obey God or honor Jesus in order to be brilliant and achieve wonders in your own area of interest. Throughout history, people who reject the Lord have nevertheless made many wonderful advances in economics, the arts, and technology. They don't really know God or have God's Spirit living in them, but they do have some splendid God-given abilities and make some remarkable contribution to the progress of human civilization. All right? Now, so here we have Lamech. We have his two wives. We have his children. And then next, we have the poetry. Lamech himself, in a sense, becomes the father of poetry, at least from a biblical perspective, because many believe Lamech is getting ready to we're getting ready to utilize a form of Hebrew poetry, and he's going to use this Hebrew poetry to have his wife. He's going to call his wives to come and listen to him. Hey, come women, come wives, listen to me speak. And he's going to speak, and he's going to use poetry, but he's going to use poetry to promote murder, to brag, maybe not to promote. Well, he's going to promote, in a sense, he's going to elevate and exalt and brag about a murder that he himself had committed. Now, if you need any more proof, this is proof. Cain names the city after his son Enoch, this exalting of self. But by the time you get to Lamech, he takes it to a whole new level. He's like, hey, look at what I can do. And it looks nothing but absolutely crazy successful. I mean, this family is the father, the origin of so many things. You've got music, you've got poetry, and I'm not saying the origin of, from a biblical perspective, the way the biblical narrative is being told. All right, we can get into all kinds of arguments about, well, we think it originated here, originated there. The Bible, these things originate with this family. They originate with these family. Music originates with them. Poetry, it appears, originates with Lamech. The cattle industry originates with them. Brass and iron and creating tools originates with them. Polygamy originates with them. All right, now let's see what he does in this poetry. All right, let's see what he does. Verse 23. And Lamech said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Now stop right there. That's funny because he's almost speaking of himself in the third person. He's telling his wives, listen to Lamech. No, wives, listen to me. But he's speaking of himself almost like he's like in a third person. Hey, listen to Lamech, wives of Lamech. My wives, listen to me. All right. So this is, again, very braggadocious. There's an arrogance to this. And again, it's about his name. Listen to Lamech. All right. Wives, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding and a young man to my hurt. Now, we don't know all the details here, but it appears someone had done something to Lamech. Hurt him, wounded him. They had done something. And Lamech had responded by killing the person. He had him killed. And he's not sorrowful about it. He's not hiding it. He's not trying to do a cover-up. He's bragging about it. Look what I have done. I have killed this person. Why has he done this? Well, again, this is very clear. And the text is screaming this. When you reject God, you exalt self. And when you exalt self, anyone that gets in your way, anyone that comes after you, they will be destroyed. You will destroy them physically. You'll destroy them verbally. You will take them down, tear them down, because you are going to do everything to protect you because it's all about you. Once you reject God, you exalt self, and you become the God that you serve, and you become the God that you will protect, and you will become the God you will defend. And that's what Lamech does. And he brags about it. He's not like, I killed a person. This is kind of bad. No, listen to me, wives. Listen to the wives of Lamech. Listen to me. Listen to what I have to say. I killed someone. It's pretty bold. But his boldness doesn't stop there. Remember Cain? Remember Cain killed someone? He killed his brother. And remember that he received punishment, and Cain was worried that, hey, this punishment is greater than I can bear, because when I'm driven out this day, guess what? So people are going to find me and they're going to kill me. And remember what the Lord said unto him? Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. Hey, look, Cain, don't worry about it. I'm going to put a mark on you. If anyone kills you, they're going to get vengeance, right? They're going to get vengeance taken on him sevenfold. A sevenfold vengeance will come on anyone that kills Cain. But then Cain departs from the presence of the Lord like, I'm building a city. It's almost like he doesn't even trust this. But listen, Lamech clearly remembers that story. He clearly remembers that information, because look what he says at the end of his poem. So let's go back to the first part. Hear my voices, wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. Verse 24. This is Genesis 4:24. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. 70 and sevenfold for me. 70 and sevenfold. If anyone comes after me, hey, there should be vengeance 77-fold for me. I should be avenged that much more than Cain, because I'm greater than Cain. I'm more important than Cain. Look at all that I've done. This is all about the exaltation of self, bragging about killing, and then believing, hey, if Cain killed someone, well, and he gets sevenfold, I should get 77-fold for what I have done. This is the exaltation of self. You reject God, you exalt self. This is the line of Cain. This is the philosophy of Cain. This is the mentality of Cain. It's all about exalting of self, pride, arrogance, murder, taking people down. It's all about that. Here's how one commentary puts it. Lamech was a pioneer of poetry who authorized the first poem recorded in the Bible. But what was the poem about? It was about a murderer. It was about a murder which Lamech himself committed. And then they quote it. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. That's how an English version translates Lamech's poem from the original language. Here was a man of genius using his poetic powers to brag about being a murderer. Lamech received a minor injury in a scuffle, and his response was to murder his opponent. Perhaps he killed him with one of the bronze blades, which his son invented. Maybe, maybe not. That's possible. I mean, we couldn't say it's not a possibility because his son was taking these different materials and then using them to create different objects. Maybe he sang his bloody poem to a tune which another son of his hand composed. Maybe he sang this poem to a tune that his son had created, who's the father of music. This commentary goes on to say, progress without God can be awful. Lamech advanced beyond his ancestor Cain in achievements, but also in wickedness. Generations earlier, when Cain committed murder, he tried to hide it. But Lamech didn't try to hide anything. He bragged about being a killer. He was proud to be the kind of man who would kill anybody that dared touch him. Back when Cain's murder was found out, Cain feared for his life, and God protected him by saying that anyone who attacked Cain would be avenged 7 times. But Lamech was too arrogant to fear anything, and he considered himself a greater avenger than God. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. The increase in evil throughout the generations from Cain to Lamech shows that when evil goes unchecked, it gains momentum from generation to generation. All right? Now, I cannot stress, this is the line of Cain. This Enoch, this Lamech, they stand as examples of what this genealogical record is trying to show us. This genealogical record is trying to demonstrate, let me state this, the rejection of God, the downplaying of God's name leads to the exaltation of self-promotion. This leads to the idea that my identity is attached to my name, what I can do, who I am, where I came from. It's this whole different mindset. All right. It's a completely different mindset that it's all about self. Your identity is connected with that line. Your identity is connected with your family name. Your identity is connected with your accomplishments. It's your identity, your legacy is all that matters to you. It's all about self. Just keep that in mind, because this is what this genealogy going from Cain down to Lamech demonstrates. But something significant happens in the text. Something significant happens in the text. And we find that in Genesis chapter 4. All right. And this sets us up for Genesis chapter 5. All right. Here we go. Genesis chapter 4, verse 25. Genesis 4:25. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son and called his name Seth. For God said, she hath appointed me another, for God said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. Now remember, Cain killed his brother Abel. Remember, Abel was a man of faith. His sacrifice was accepted because he offered it by faith, if we read the book of Hebrews. Abel was righteous. He brought a sacrifice the right way with the right heart attitude with faith. And Cain, he gets upset. He's rejected. Instead of listening to God, Cain decides to do it his way, kills his brother, then complains that the punishment is too severe. God shows him mercy, and then Cain runs off, creates a city, names it after his son, right? All about exaltation of self, and I'm going to leave my name, I'm going to leave, show you what I have produced. this is what I have done. And then from that line comes Lamech, a man all about self. That whole line, right, is ungodly and has rejected the truth. But then the story picks back up, and we have Adam and Eve again, and they produce a son. They produce a son, and this son, his name is Seth, all right? Now, this is very important, all right? His name is Seth, and look at what the text says. His name is Seth, for God said, okay, let me read this again. Genesis 4:25. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. Now, Seth, the idea, his name means to compensate. To compensate. It's almost like here is, in a sense, to compensate your loss. Here's a replacement for your loss. Abel was killed. Now here is Seth. All right. Now, this starts a new genealogical line. We got the line from Cain. Now we have Seth and his line. And look what happens almost immediately from the line of Seth. This is very interesting. Okay. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Enos. Now, according to a number of sources, Enos' name means man is in his frailty, weak. Wait a minute. Okay, Cain's line, hey, look at them. Powerful, successful, history-changing, life-altering family that's changing the world forever. 2 wives, one is beautiful, the other one is comforting. A daughter, loveliness. Look at all the things that they've done. Look, he kills a man, and obviously he doesn't get punished for it. He brags about it. This family looks like they're powerful. They are successful. Look at this line. Even Cain, he built a city and named it after his son. No matter what had happened to them, they look like that they're powerful. They're successful. Their name is going to be known. I mean, everything about them looks like, wow, I wish we could be them. And then here, it's very quiet. It's like there's almost a tone, a change in volume. And then the text is like, Adam and Eve, they were given another son to replace Abel. His name was Seth. And he had a son named Enos. Now, when you stop and look, Enos means weak, fragile. Well, that seems odd. That seems weird. Well, it doesn't when we realize that mankind before a holy God, we are weak, we are fragile, we are sinners, we are nothing but dust before the holy God. Now you say, but Cain and Lamech Cain, Enoch, and Lamech, they all look like that family line looks so powerful. But guess what? And spiritually speaking, they're weak. You know why we're so weak spiritually? Because we're born guilty in Adam. We are born with Adam's sinful nature. We are sinners. We are weak spiritually. We are broken. We're flawed. We're condemned. We're doomed. We're weak. We're frail. But this is what happens when you downplay God. You exalt self. You deny. You reject any claim of weakness on your part. You reject it. But those who do not reject God, those who do not downplay God, but they exalt God and they exalt his name, they see themselves as they really are, weak and frail. Woe is me, I'm undone. When you see God as he truly is, you are confronted with the reality of who you are. And here we're given a little sense that Enos, weak and frail, so opposite to this other family line. But note something. Now something very powerful that happens here. And to Seth, Genesis 4:26, and to Seth, to him also was born a son and called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. They began to call on the name of the Lord. Here is the major this is kind of the hinge that this door between these two genealogies, it moves. This is the hinge. This is the transition. This is the opening of the door. We've got on one side this line of Cain. Yes, from a human perspective, they look powerful. They look successful. We would almost be envious to them. And then on the hinge, the door opens. And then here we see this other family. But before the door is open, all we see is Cain's line and like powerful, successful. Woo, look at them. And then the door opens and then here's Seth and his son, weak, fragile. We have no description of any accomplishments. But then we're told, then men begin to call on the name of the Lord. Completely, this demonstrates the mindset. I cannot stress this. You reject God, it's about self. But we know from the New Testament, when we turn to God, to follow God, it's all about the death of self. Following God is not the exaltation of self, it's the death of self. Christianity calls us to take up a cross, to die. It's not about what we can accomplish here on this earth. It's not about earthly accomplishments. My identity is not found in my name. It's not found in my ancestors. It's not found in my DNA. None of that matters to the Christian. For the Christian, it's all about my identity is who I am in God. I am to live for him. I die to self. I'm not a citizen here on this earth. This is not my home. My affection is set above. I am seeking the kingdom of God. I am storing up treasures in heaven. It's all about God. And the door opens and it seems so insignificant. Here's this family, weak and frail, but they begin to call on the name of the Lord. That seems like an insignificant thing. But that's what matters. They begin to call on the name of the Lord. That's what matters. All of those other things that is in the life of Lamech and the life of Cain and Enoch, that's insignificant. Oh, I've got a city named after me. That sounds important. No, what matters, are you calling on the name of the Lord? I'm powerful. I've got a beautiful wife. I got a wife that's comforting. I have these children who have changed the world. My name's going to live on forever. What matters? Are you calling on the name of the Lord? And I know that you and I, look, we're human beings. Sometimes we want all of that other stuff. We want all of that success. We want all of that recognition. We want all of that fame. We want all of that. But what matters is, are you calling on the name of the Lord? That's what matters. And they begin to call on the name of the Lord, which brings us to Genesis chapter 5. And then we're introduced to two men with the same names. We're going to be found in Genesis 5, where we meet the man Enoch. This Enoch is very different than the first Enoch. The first Enoch is a son of Cain who gets a city named after him. It's all about him. This Enoch, completely different. Look what we read about this Enoch. All right, very interesting. Genesis 5:21, Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. All right, men begin to call on the name of the Lord and the family line of Seth. We don't read that in the family line of Cain. Enoch walks with God, calling on the name of God, walking with God. When you walk with God, it's about God. It's not about you. Walking with God is not about your fame, your prestige, your recognition. No, it's about God. You walk with God to honor and to glorify him. It's about God. He walked with God. If you go to Hebrews chapter 11, we find out a little bit more information about this Enoch. He's walking with God. We also find this, Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. So Enoch walked with God. Enoch had faith in God, and Enoch pleased God. And how did he please God? A lot of times people say that he pleased God because he walked with God, but I think Hebrews gives us kind of an indication. He pleased God, verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please him. Right? So I think it's by faith that he pleased God. It was his faith that pleased him. He pleased God. He had faith in God. He walked with God, and then we go back. Hebrews says he was translated, he was taken. Genesis 5 puts it this way. Enoch, verse 24, Genesis 5:24, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He was translated. He escaped death. He escaped death. Now we don't know anything about his earthly accomplishments. He doesn't have a city named after him. We'd have none of this. But guess what we do know? We have his spiritual accomplishments. He walked with God. He had faith in God. He pleased God. He was translated. He escaped death. That's the life of the believer. The life of the believer is a life about walking with God. It's a life of believing in God. It's a life of pleasing God. It's not a life of exalting self. It's a life where God is the focus. God is the purpose. God is the desire. God is where you set your affections. You're seeking first his kingdom. You're seeking first his will. But it all began when man began to call on the name of the Lord in the line of Seth. The contract. Now, you look at Enoch, and you're like, oh, here's this man. He's walking with God. He has faith in God. He's pleasing God. Oh, but look at Lamech. Man, those two wives. Look at all what those sons have done. They've changed the world. We're using we're using their music. We're using their idea for a tent. We raise cattle. We're using the same tools, all because of that family. That family would get all the recognition. But Enoch walked with God. In church, when we're sitting in church, we are like, yes, Enoch walked with God. He's a hero. But let's be honest. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, our attentions go to the Lamechs, not to the people walking with God. Our attention go to the Cains who can build an entire city and name it after their son. Those are the ones who get all the attention. But that's completely different. Well, God has a different way of thinking, a different mindset in mind. A completely different way of thinking. All right. Now we got to go quickly. All right. Now we get to the Lamech here. Very interesting. Genesis chapter 5. We get to the Lamech here. Now this is interesting. All right. So in Genesis 5:27, or go back to Genesis 5:25, and Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech. And Methuselah lived after he begat Lamech 782 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. And he called his name Noah. Now this Lamech comes along. And we don't have all of the words of, he did all of these things. He had all of these sons no. We don't have any of this bragging, any of this arrogance. We don't have a Lamech here killing anyone and bragging about killing anyone. No, this Lamech is known for having a son. And he called his name Noah. Now, interesting. If you look up Noah, at least in the Blue Letter Bible app, and I think in a number of other sources, his name means rest. That's interesting. Lamech, he's going to produce a son that he produces a son that brings some kind of rest. Now we'll look at the actual wording here. I think it's very interesting. And he called his name Noah, saying, the same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord had cursed. This Lamech here, the one in Genesis 5, produces a son, and the son is going to bring about a comfort because of all the work and the toil that we do with the land. This Lamech realizes, man, things are not good, things are bad. He realizes he realizes the reality of the curse. He realizes how hard life is, and he knows that we need some comfort, we need some rest. And so he names his son Noah. And if you think about it, Noah, I want you to listen to this. Noah, in a sense, calls people to rest, right? Hey, a flood is coming. You're going to drown. Get into the ark, and then you can rest. You can have comfort. While the storm is raging and people are dying, you can have comfort, but people reject that. They don't listen to that. They don't want that. They don't want it in any way, shape, or form. They reject it completely. All right. But this Lamech produces a son who is going to bring comfort and rest by calling people into the ark. But think about it this way. This is very, very, very important. Noah will preserve Noah will ultimately be used to preserve the human the line that ultimately Christ will come from. He's going to preserve humanity so that the Messiah can ultimately come. And guess what? This is very important. By preserving humanity so that the Messiah would come, one day the Messiah would come, Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ would say, "Come unto me, all you who are weary." All of you, in fact, I'll just read the words for you. You know them, Matthew chapter 11. I'm paraphrasing them, but it'd be better just to get them accurate. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Lamech brings forth a son called Noah, rest. He does so, and because the exact words, he says and he called his name Noah, saying that this same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. This Noah is going to ultimately bring comfort to us and rest. Well, how does he do that? Well, he brings immediate comfort and rest on the ark, right? Get into the ark. Comfort and rest from drowning. Okay, God is going to drown the earth. He's going to bring a flood upon the cursed earth. He's going to kill everything and everyone. Okay, they could have rest and comfort that way. But I think there's a long-term prophetic image. Noah will preserve the human line that Christ will ultimately enter into, because the eternal Son of God will take upon human flesh. He will take upon the curse on himself. Cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree. He will take the thorns that are a part of the curse and wear as a crown. He will hang on a tree. He will die. And he gives an invitation to you and to me. Hey, those who are weary and heavy laden, come unto me, and I will give you rest. Rest. We can rest in Christ from working for our salvation. We can rest in Christ for our salvation. We can trust in him. We can trust and rest in Christ to avoid judgment, just as they could have rested in the ark to avoid the judgment of the flood. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture that's established, completely different than the other Lamech. The other Lamech was, I killed someone. This Lamech is, I'm trying to bring comfort. I'm trying to bring rest from all the toil and all the curse. One wants to bring rest and comfort. The other one killed someone and bragged about it. Radically different. These two genealogies are radically different. I cannot stress it enough. Let me read how one commentary puts it. All right, we're at 57 minutes. I'm going to try to wrap all of this up. All right, here we go. Though they bore the same name, Lamech in the line of Seth was radically different from the Lamech in the line of Cain. Seth's Lamech fathered a son, Noah, who walked with God, Genesis 6:9, and was used of God to save the human race and continue the messianic promise. Cain's Lamech murdered a young man who had wounded him and then boasted to his wives about his evil deed. Genesis 4:23. Lamech's great concern was that mankind find comfort and rest in the midst of a wicked world where it was necessary to toil and sweat just to stay alive. Life was difficult, and the only hope that true believers had was the coming of the promised Redeemer. Lamech named his son Noah, which sounds like the Hebrew word for comfort. His prayer was that his son would somehow bring to the world the rest and comfort that people so sorely needed. Centuries later, weary people would hear the voice of Jesus, "Come to me, all ye who labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. Now, Lamech was 682 years old, Noah 500 years old when Noah's son Japheth was born. The listing in Genesis 5:32 is not the son's birth order, because Ham was Noah's youngest son and Japheth his eldest. All right, now, the birth order would have been Japheth, Shem, and Ham. I just briefly mentioned that because I don't know why it's that way. Go back to Genesis 5. I do not know why. If you look at, if you go to Genesis chapter 5, and Lamech lived and begat Noah 595 years, and he begat sons and daughters, and all the days of Lamech were 170 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I do not know why they're not in birth order. I do not know. I don't know. I think possibly it signifies that, hey, the purpose of this genealogy is not to have everything in perfect order. It's not to try to give us an age of the earth. I think this is trying to demonstrate that this is not about a proper order and everything being listed exactly right. What this is trying to demonstrate is it's a contrast between the line of Seth and the line of Cain. The genealogies is to compare and contrast. And the thing that everything hinges on is in Genesis 4, that men began to call upon the name of the Lord. The line of Cain, they didn't call upon the name of the Lord. No, they did not. They rejected it. The line of Seth, they began to call on the name of the Lord. And the line of Seth doesn't have people who are known for all these big accomplishments like in the line of Cain, but they're known for walking with God, pleasing God, having faith in God, producing a son, and worried about bringing comfort and rest to a world that was suffering under the curse of sin. And that ultimately, through Noah preserving, the Messiah would come, which would save us from the curse. That's the contrast. And I want to really drive this contrast home. This is so important. In your way of thinking, you have borrowed and you live with the philosophy that comes from the line of Cain. You exalt self. You are all worried about self. And guess what? When someone comes after self, someone attacks you, you will put them down. You will kill them. Maybe not physically, but you'll kill them verbally. You'll kill them with gossip, slander. You will hate them. You will not forgive them. You will reject them completely. But let me make it very clear. The line that comes from Seth, the line that's following God, we think completely different than Cain did. We think completely different than Enoch. We could think completely different than Lamech. You're either going to have the philosophy that comes from the line of Cain, or you're going to have the philosophy that comes from the line of Seth. And let me just throw out some quick differences. The line of Cain is an exaltation of self. The line of Cain is about exalting self, exalting your name. The line that comes from Seth, the godly line, the line that's following God, you humble self. You die to self. Are you exalting self or dying to self? Very important. So either you're going to exalt self or die to self. Another contrast. If you think like the line of Cain, your identity is going to be found in your family. It's going to be found in your accomplishments. Your identity is all going to be connected to your race, your genealogy, where you came from, what your parents did. You're going to find so much purpose and comfort in that. But no. If you're in the godly line, that you're following God, you're following Christ, then your identity will be in Christ, because you disappear, you die. It's not about you anymore. It's not about what your grandparents did. It's not about who you are. It's not about your DNA. In Christ, listen, in Christ, there's no more Jew or Gentile. In Christ, there's neither male nor female. In Christ, your identity is Christ. It's not in anything else. You become identified as a Christian. You die. It's not about you anymore. And there's also a radically different approach to life. And Lamech, he brags about killing someone. He brags about it. I do this. Look, if you're in the line of Seth, it's completely, radically different. Look at Matthew chapter 5. Just got to do this really, really quick. Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. You have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that resist not evil. Whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. If a man will sue thee at the law, take away thy coat, let him have that cloak also. Whoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. If in the line of Cain, it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to worry about my rights. I'm going to stand for my rights. I'm going to get my rights. I'm going to defend my rights. But in the godly line of Seth and the godly line of Christ, ultimately the Messiah, following him, it's not about your rights. You turn the other cheek. It's not an eye for an eye. You don't do that. You resist not evil. If an evil government passes some weird, wacky rule that you got to carry a soldier's gear a mile, you carry it too. You go above and beyond. If someone sues you for your coat, you go to the courthouse and give them your shirt as well. You don't defend your rights. You don't demand your rights. You sacrifice your rights because it's not about you. You're dead. You're living for God. You're exalting God. You want to exalt God in everything. It's not about you. So you give up everything. That's completely different. Lamech killed at the Lamech and Cain's line, killed the person. Jesus goes on to say in Matthew 5, very important. You've heard that it's been said that love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. I say unto you, love your enemy. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. Pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sendeth the rain on the just and the unjust. That's not Lamech from Cain's line. Lamech from Cain's line is, no, I'm not going to love anybody. I'll kill whoever. The Lamech in Seth's line, he's going to name his son Noah because he wants people to find rest and comfort from the curse. We want our enemies to find rest and comfort. We want to love them. We want to turn the other cheek. We don't want to resist them. We want to give up our rights. We want to do what we can to help. We want to do what we can to preserve. We do what we can to promote life, even at our own expense. That's a completely different mindset. Now, here's the thing. In church, we want to talk like the godly line of Seth. In the world, we talk like we're from the ungodly line of Cain. Where's your philosophy? The ungodly line of Cain or the godly line of Seth? I cannot stress that enough. And then one other very important thing that we have to look at here, because I think it's very important. Go to Matthew chapter 18. One other very important thing. Matthew chapter 18. I know we've gone a little long, but that's okay. Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. Now, in verses 15 through 20, we have this whole thing about if a brother trespass against you and how you're trying to handle a brother who's sinned against you, someone who's done something to you. And in verse 21, Matthew chapter 18, verse 21, Peter comes along and says, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and shall I forgive him? Till 7 times? He's like, hey, Lord, I get this idea of, trying to work this out and trying to forgive someone. But I mean, if they sin against me 2 times, 3 times, okay, 4 times, okay, 5, okay, but obviously not more than 7 times. I mean, 7 times is sufficient, right? After 7, then I'm done. I don't have to forgive them. And then what does Jesus say? Now, he almost borrows from the words of the Lamech and Cain's line. Remember? I'll be avenged 70 times 7. I'll be avenged 77 times, right? Vengeance will be mine 77-fold. If it was 7 for Cain, 77 for me. And what does Jesus say? Oh, well, if someone sins against you, well, this is what you do. I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. It's not about, hey, how much vengeance am I going to get? No, it's about how many times can you forgive someone else? Why? Because it's not about you. It's about God. And the godly line? Romans 11. Overcome evil with good. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We don't take vengeance because we're dead. We're dead. We die. If we truly die, we're not worried about our rights. We're not demanding our rights. We're not fighting for our rights. We're not fighting. No, we are forgiving because it's not about us. It's about God. It's about Christ. Which line? The ungodly line of Cain and that Enoch and that Lamech, or the godly line of Seth, that Enoch and that Lamech? Which one? Which one? Are you walking with God, pleasing to God, have faith in God? Are you the one wanting to bring that about which will bring rest and comfort to people, which is the gospel, which is Christ? Which one? How do you think? How do you live? Now, I say all of that because all of that leads us to Genesis chapter 6. Because in Genesis chapter 6, guess what happens? Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, Genesis 6, there's much dispute here. Many believe the daughters of men are obviously human women, and the sons of God are angelic beings who have fallen. They take these daughters of men, begin to have physical relations, begin to produce children, which then begins to corrupt the human line and the human race. And this is going to possibly stop the Messiah from coming. And so some believe what happens in Genesis 6 is a satanic plot to corrupt, to basically mutate the human line so that Christ could not come. So then God has to send a flood to wipe all of them out. But before you go to that interpretation, please remember what just happened in Genesis 4 and 5. We have a contrast between two lines, the ungodly line of Cain and the godly line of Seth. Now, you have to take into the consideration that it's possible that genealogical contrasting and comparing flows into Genesis 6 so that the daughters of men from the ungodly line of Cain and the sons of God from the godly line of Seth. And that this was mingling the godly with the ungodly and basically being unequally yoked. Now, some would say, well, is that grounds for flooding the world? Well, is that the reason the world was flooded or something else? All I'm saying is that genealogical contrasting and comparing in Genesis 4 and 5 has to be considered when you interpret Genesis 6. It has to be. It has to be. Because clearly no angels are mentioned in Genesis 4 or 5. No angelic beings. No angelic beings trying to come and get involved with nothing. So that flows right into Genesis 6. So you can't, do you just then immediately in Genesis 6 forget 4 and 5 and insert angels? Something to consider. But that's not the focus for this, is not on that question. The focus on this is these two genealogies, these two genealogical records, the line of Cain, the line of Seth. What philosophy have you adopted? How are you living? All right. I've got to stop there because of time. Please let me know if this is helpful. Please let me know if this worked. This is like my, third, fourth, fifth, 20th try and finishing up Genesis 5. At this point, I'm very discouraged. So any encouragement would be greatly appreciated. Email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. I'm going to stop before anything goes wrong. Thank you for listening. Maybe at some point we'll move to Genesis chapter 6 if I don't retire in the next few minutes. Thank you for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.